Well, the book is intellectual property in electronics and software, and it came about through two things. Firstly, there's a companion volume in the life sciences, and secondly, there doesn't really seem to be a book out there which is dedicated to the intellectual property rights in this particular area.
The book discusses IP in all corners of the world. Were you struck by any particular differences?
There are differences throughout the world in various details, but the one which really stands out is India. Interestingly, India is a big area for outsourcing software development, but intellectual property law is really very old-fashioned and a long way behind the other countries covered in the book.
What key advice would you have for international companies with a global outlook?
Well, it all comes down to the same thing. You're trying to maximise value by maximising IP rights. So it's managing that process.
One of the big developments is the unitary patent court and the unitary patent. Do you have anything to say about that?
Well, it's certainly going to have a big impact on patent-rich companies. The whole thing is making enforcement of patent rights in Europe much easier, and through that, the value of patents and hence patent-rich companies will increase.
The concept of FRAND is very topical right now. What do you think is meant by fair and reasonable?
That's a very difficult question, but basically you have certain patents which are standard essential, so you've got a group of companies determining a standard, and what's fair and reasonable is what is the value of that patent because of its innovation element, rather than because it's part of a standard which everyone has adopted and is obliged to adopt.
The book talks a little bit about the proliferation of open source business models. Can you just introduce the concept of open source for our readers?
Open source is quite interesting. It's based around copyright, so that's restricting what people can and can't do. And it's a licensing arrangement which basically says everyone can do what they like with it. It's a many eyes approach. But from a business perspective, it's very important to balance the having open source policy which takes advantage of a cooperative approach to developing code, and equally how you maintain your rights, because part of open source being open means that you can't keep it unique to your own company.
IP rights are at the heart of the electronics and software industry. What do companies really need to think about when leveraging their IP rights?
Well, it's always the same. How are you going to maximise your rights? You want to have the right rights at the right time, in the right place. And how you manage that process, whether it's unregistered rights or registered rights, without paying too much for them, and without finding that you haven't got the rights you need when you need them.
Non-practicing entities and patent trolls, what do you think about them?
Non-trading entities, patent trolls, are a natural part of going for where the money is. With mobile phones, for example, since the market is so valuable and patent rights are so important, it's understandable that someone is going to come along and try and charge to take some of that money.
Are there any particularly interesting IP cases that have come about since the book's been published?
Well, it's quite interesting that since the book's been published, there hasn't actually been very much going on. Two cases are a good example of that. We had the Apple and HTC Court of Appeal case, which again touched on fundamental patentability. But very much that was just reiterating what's already been decided. And similarly, in the European Patent Office, there was the Nokia mobile shopping case. And again, it refers back to existing case law. So just at the moment, things are looking relatively settled, possibly because of the big emphasis on the unitary patent, which will be coming over in the next few years.
Do you have any predictions for the future in this area?
Well, the big trend is quite clear, actually. The intellectual property rights are increasing drivers of value in this area. So if a company is not looking after those rights, it's going to have a real problem in the future global marketplace.
And a quick summary of the book for our readers. Why they should go out and buy your book?
It's a book which brings together the different intellectual property rights in the important jurisdictions throughout the area of electronics and software, and that's the unique element. It covers both patents and copyright, and it covers those aspects which are just relevant to this type of technology. So that's why you should go and buy it.